Well, good morning, everybody. Good to see you guys as usual. And it's going to be a fun day. I've been really looking forward to this. And I can tell you this that, I had coffee with Pastor Carl the other day, and I asked Pastor Carl, I said, do you want me to, kind of keep on with the theme of home and welcome home? And I was just thinking about that, when we had coffee the other day. And I was thinking, for myself, it's always great to be back here, behind the pulpit. How many know, for me, anywhere outside of this pulpit is a timeshare. And anytime I'm here, it's a home. And it's really great to be here with you guys. But I was thinking, when I was with Pastor Carl and we were talking, and Pastor Carl just basically said, I trust you. Have a great time. You don't need to stick on the welcome home thing. Just kind of get her done. And when he was talking about that, I was just thinking of there's only one other guy that I know of that can really emphasize what Pastor Carl would say. And I think it might be this guy right here.
This is Larry the Cable Guy. There's a lot of ways to say get her done. This is one. Get her done. Here's another one. Get her done. And here's another different way. Get her done. All three different meanings to the word get her done.
So I was thinking about that. I thought, that would be a good emphasis. Pastor Carl, Larry the Cable Guy. I love Larry the Cable Guy, and he and I are that's just like almost looks like a little bit about Pastor Carl without the tattoo there, But so I'm excited about all that. I think it's going to be a great, great day. But I want you to go to 1 Timothy, I think, 2 Timothy, if you will. And I believe that we have the overhead up there, 2 Timothy. And no, go back. No, 2 Timothy. And 2 Timothy, you just had it right there. It's like the first slide. There it is. Thank you very much. 2 Timothy 4:7-8 says, I have fought the good fight. I have finished the race. I have kept the faith. Finally, there is laid up for me the crown of righteousness, which the Lord will award for me on that day, and not only me, but also for those who have longed for his appearing. How many of you in the house today are longing for his appearing? I love that. We have kept the faith. Finally, there is laid up for me a crown of righteousness. Finally. How many know when I see the word finally, I think of Brian, I think of journey. How many, you go through your journey, you go through your stuff, and you finally come up with that word, finally, it's over. Finally, I've arrived. And I was thinking about, Jeff Foxworthy. I like Jeff Foxworthy. Jeff Foxworthy's pretty cool. And, I like some of Jeff Foxworthy's definitions. Jeff Foxworthy said, you can tell that you're a NASCAR redneck if your first buck you ever shot was on a sign. He says, you can tell that you're a NASCAR redneck if you've ever run a business from a payphone. And I love NASCAR. Matter of fact, I was looking up some things the other day, and this is really kind of cool. He says, you can tell that you're a NASCAR redneck when your favorite NASCAR souvenir was a direct result of crash in turn 3. You can tell that you're a NASCAR redneck when you can remember every NASCAR driver and their car number, but you can't remember how old your children are. Come on. You can tell that you're a NASCAR redneck. No, sorry, got that label here. You can tell that you're a NASCAR redneck when your pet nickname for your wife is Lugnut. Okay. You can tell that you're a NASCAR redneck when you can change a tire faster than you can change a diaper. Or you've spent more time on top of a Winnebago than in one. Yeah. And you think that the last 4 words of the national anthem are, gentlemen, start your engines. That's good. Kevin likes that. You can tell that you're a NASCAR redneck when you pull into the gas station behind someone else just to see if you can beat them out. This, of course, would require that your wife would need to clean the windshield and that your son to check the tires. And the last one, and my favorite one, is this. You can tell if you're a NASCAR redneck if someone asks the time at church and your answer is, and half an hour past the race time. Well, that's how you can tell that you're a NASCAR redneck. But I've got a little clip that I wanted to show you because this whole theme has to do with NASCAR. It has everything to do with finishing the race, and I think we have a little clip here that'll kind of emphasize that a little bit more.
Single file. Here they go. They got to go. They got to get Mark moving. They got to move him somehow. Gets back to that yellow line right around the bottom, all the way through turn 1 and 2. Mark Martin is driving the race of his life. And there's nobody that's better at holding people off at Daytona.
Kyle Busch lagged back a little bit. Is he going to get help? Is he going to come? He's looking.
Back behind you.
He almost squeezed Harvick into the wall, and here comes Harvick, the 29, with Matt Kenseth.
Oh, Mark got loose. Mark got loose.
And Harvick's getting a run off turn 4. It's going to be a drag race all the way back to the start-finish line. No caution. They're side by side, right to the line. Big crash. Here they come. Checkered flag. Kevin Harvick wins the Daytona 500. We got one car on his roof coming across the start-finish line.
Still wrecking. They're wrecking everywhere. Boyer's on fire. Jeff Gordon's wrecked.
And they're still wrecking. Montoya, Stremme, Kenseth, Biffle, Marlin, Carl Edwards, Casey Mears all crashed on the final lap. Look at this finish.
And it's a drag race to the line, and we've seen Harvick do that before.
Yes, we have. Could see Harvick trying to
Look how close that is.
That momentum on him.
Little side draft. Get a little side draft and try to pull ahead.
Wow.
Now unofficially.
All right, that's good. Not so bad, even though that was the second video, not the first one, but it's all good. Look. Oh, poor Kevin Harvick. Oh, doesn't that make you feel good? I love that. Matter of fact, I tried to get Jeff Gordon to come, but he couldn't. But he does say hi. And I figured I couldn't do this message without, getting into the park. So, pardon me a little bit. I gotta kind of get her done. You know what I'm talking about? And so I gotta put my Jeff Gordon stuff on. And really, I love all this stuff. I gotta feel the part. Don't you have to feel the part? So here's what I'm thinking for you here today. How bad do you want to win this race? Bad enough to win. How bad do you want to win this race? Bad enough to win. And you know what? There's all sorts of pictures of Jeff Gordon. There's only one picture of Junior, because he doesn't really win a whole lot. But Pastor Carl is praying for him and believing that one day he's going to finally win. And though he's done pretty good this year, I think it's going to be awesome. I want to talk to you a little bit today about that subject on how bad do you want to win? And I'm thinking about Kevin Harvick. I was watching the video. That was actually the second video, because there was another one, coming up. And, there's times that, you get into this race and you get so close. And sometimes, you feel like throwing in the towel, and you feel like quitting. You feel like it's just not going to happen. And everything looks perfect and everything looks right. And then sure enough, here comes somebody, boom, just right beside you. And you feel like, dang, man, I almost had it. But you know what? How many realize that in this particular race that we're in, there are no losers? There are no losers in this race, and that's what I want to talk a little bit about today, because in NASCAR, it's the only sport in the United States which opens its weekly ceremonies with an invocation. And it's not just any old prayer. It's almost always a good, strong Christian one, invoking the blessings of Jesus on the event and on the participants. In fact, Christian influences are prevalent in the sport everywhere, from sponsors to driver testimonies to trackside prayer services. Privately owned companies have all sanctioned stock car races since 1948 when NASCAR began, and it all had some sort of connection with Christianity. What I really loved about the whole NASCAR scene and all about qualifying for a race was that they are not ashamed whatsoever to mention Jesus Christ in anything. Matter of fact, it's almost a given. I am one of the chaplains for motor racing outreach and at Delaware Motor Speedway. That whenever they have their special events, they'll call me in and, pray for the drivers and all this kind of stuff. And it's really great when you get to do that, because in the NASCAR world and the NASCAR community, they really recognize that people's lives are on the line and they could be gone at any given moment, and they certainly want the blessing, of the Lord, on those races. And so I love that whole community, and a lot of the drivers are really, strong Bible-believing guys. Racing and Christianity have a very close mindset, believe it or not, because according to Professor Baker, who's a professor of history at the University of Maine, he often writes in newspapers and magazines about sports and religion, and he says this. He says that there is a logic to evangelical Christianity and racing having a cozy relationship. He says in many ways they're very similar. He said both are win-loss mentalities. And in evangelical Christianity, you're either saved or lost. You're going or you're gone. But he says, that there's a great coalition there. And he says in auto racing that there's a process known, get this, as qualifying for the race. Now, those of you who have ever spent a Sunday afternoon, and some of you you may be bored out of your mind and already checked out, you go, NASCAR, what a waste of a Sunday afternoon. On Friday and Saturday, that they're always qualifying for the race. And they're always trying to see who's going to get into the pole position. But I want you to realize something here today is if your performance is good enough, if you're fast enough and consistent enough in NASCAR, then you can qualify for one of those best positions as the cars begin lining up on the line. It's known as the pole position. But the Bible tells us that there's a great big problem with us qualifying for the race to heaven because we're never really good enough. We don't have the ability, if you will, to qualify because of our own inability. Romans 3:23 tells us that we have all sinned and falling short of the glory. In other words, that we have fallen short of the qualifying. All of us come to this race, if you will, with damaged vehicles. All of us come to this competition with tires that are worn and engines, if you will, that have been abused. And it doesn't matter how well we can conduct ourselves on the track. It doesn't matter how skilled we are behind the wheel, that we'll never make it to the finish line as we are. No matter how good we think we are, no matter how Bible thumping we might be, no matter what our Bible memorization is, it just seems that we're just not quite good enough. But I want you to look with me to Colossians chapter 1 and chapter 12, or verse 12. He says, giving thanks to the Father who qualified you to share in the inheritance of the saints and in the kingdom of light. He qualified you, even when you didn't have it in and of yourself to do it all by yourself, and you went through all what Pastor Carl would say. You've gone through all the maintenance, and you've gone through all the performance, and you've done everything you've done. How many realize, sometimes, Bill, we can go through all the stuff, and we can go through all the right methods and have all the right motivation speeches, and, we can go to all the sermons or services, and then you still feel like it's just not quite good enough. But then Jesus steps in. And he says, why are you striving so hard? Why are you trying to please me? He said, you can please me just by being you. He said, you know what? I didn't lay down my life just for nothing. He said, I did it for you. And if I had to do it all over again, I still would have done it for you. He says, I have qualified you for this race. You're going to win this thing. You're going to get through. Trust me. Psalm 125 says, those who trust in the Lord are like Mount Zion, which cannot be shaken but endures forever. And just as the mountains surround Jerusalem, so the Lord will surround and protect his people both now and forevermore. The good news today is this: you are already pre-qualified for the race. There are no losers in this house. It's amazing. He says, giving thanks to the Father who qualified us. You and I couldn't do it, so God stepped in and he did the qualifying for us. Lake Speed has been one of the most prominent racers on the NASCAR circuit. And he said, most of my life I had all the things that the world says will make you happy. He said, I had the big house, the cars, the boat. He said, I was very successful, but there was still an emptiness on the inside. Nothing else has worked up to this time. Fame, money, success, all the toys. He says, after that, I started going to church and really got into Bible reading and realized that Christ was the answer for me, and Christ put my life back together again. How many realize here tonight, you can have all the stuff, you can have all the toys, you can have all the fame, you can have all the fortune, you can have all the money, the babes, the girls, the prominence, the recognition. Without Jesus, we've got nothing. I can tell you this, Cheryl and I have seen a crazy measure, of success in business. But you know what? All of that is vainglory. It's emptiness. It means nothing. This is home for me. This is home. I wish I can just do what I do just to get me back here, whether it's here or whatever pulpit it is. This is home for me. Everything else is just a timeshare. Everything else is just putting in time. Because how many realize every single one of us, when you're pre-qualified for the race, nothing else will compare. Nothing else will matter. It doesn't matter it doesn't matter what your position is. It doesn't matter how nice your clothes are. It doesn't matter how big your house is. How many know that there are people on the north side of town in those big $3, $4, $5 million mansions up there that there are some of the loneliest people you'd ever imagine? Because money still can't satisfy. Success still can't satisfy. There's only one person that satisfies, and he is the very one who qualified you to make it through this life and make it through this journey and make it through this race, and his name is Jesus. How bad do you want to win? Bad enough to win. Man, what you gonna do, brother? Hebrews chapter 12, I love it. This scene is there in Hebrews chapter 12, and it really says that therefore we also, since we're surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, he said, let us lay aside every weight and the sin that so easily entangles us or ensnares us, and let us run with endurance the race that is set before us, looking unto Jesus, the author and the finisher of our faith, for the joy that was set before him, he endured the cross, despising the shame, and sat down at the right hand of the Father. In verse 3 of chapter 12, he says, for consider him who endured such hostility from sinners against himself, lest you become weary and discouraged in your souls. I love this thing in Hebrews chapter 12 because it talks about this heavenly arena which is filled with all of those who have gone before us. The question is, are they witnesses in the sense that they are watching B'nai and cheering for the contestants, or are they witnesses in the sense that they have left examples for us to follow? I kind of tend to think that it's both. That they've left examples for us to follow, and they're still watching. They're like the people in the stands in the NASCAR. They're watching everything that's going on, and you're rooting for your favorite driver, and you're rooting for your favorite team. And I get excited when I see, Micah, and he's playing football, and he's enduring, and he's training, and there's nothing that satisfies that kid more than wearing purple. He bleeds purple. It's like the Western, or what do you call it, Junior Mustangs, and he wants to go for UWO and all this kind of stuff. And, there's this endurance, and he's practicing, and he's training, and he's getting ready. And, for him, it's not a matter if he just wins all the time. He just wants to be part of the team. How many know the exciting thing is that we're all part of the team? It doesn't matter what your religious title and your tag are. We're all winners in Christ Jesus. There are no losers in his presence. There are no fakes. There is no people that are just not going to, just not measure up. Jesus looks at you and he says, I don't care if you're thin, you're fat, or you're skinny, or you're green, or you can't fit into a washing machine. He said, you're still amazing in my sight. He loves everybody. I'm telling you, it's awesome. We look in Hebrews chapter 12 and we think for a moment, who was there? Well, Abel was there. Abel is there, having offered a better sacrifice, a sacrifice offered with an attitude of faith. Abraham is there, who is a man who is willing to leave the land of his fathers and follow God's command to go to a country that he had never even seen before. Enoch is there, a man not known for his impressive accomplishments, but rather for his walk with God. Noah was there. This is fun. The man who trusted God enough to withstand the ridicule of his neighbors and obeyed God's command to spend 120 years building a boat in preparation for something that they'd never even seen before, rain and floods. How many know that would have given just a little bit of criticism in Noah's? Hey, what are you doing? Building a boat. What's a boat? I don't know. God told me. How many know most people outside the church world don't understand the phrase, God told me? But when God speaks to you, the very one who qualifies for you for the prize, and he begins to speak to you, nothing changes the fact of his presence. You know what? We need to passionately pursue his presence. And for those of you who passionately pursue his presence, you know his voice. Why? Because the word says, my sheep hear my voice. And if you haven't heard his voice lately, then maybe the next question is, are you one of his sheep? Here's the answer to that. Yes. You just need to clean out your ears. You just need to clean out your ears. Because there's all kind of things getting inside your ear that's going to prevent you from hearing Daddy's voice. NASCAR, get her done. Get her done. Get her done. How bad do you want to win? Bad enough to win. You see, our citizenship in heaven is settled the very moment that we accept Jesus Christ as our Savior. You know what? All of the striving is done at that point. It's like, it's over. You know what? There's nothing more liberating. There's nothing more freeing. There's nothing more going, wow. It's like the weight is lifted. Because when you finally get into his presence and you finally realize that Jesus is more than just a curse word. He's more than a piece of jewelry you hang around your neck. He's more than what would Jesus do. That he really is a friend that sticks closer than a brother. And maybe you have a brother that's not really a good friend, but you realize that he is a friend that sticks closer than a brother. You realize that he is the mother that you don't have. He is the father that you lost. He is your employer that maybe your earthly one might have fired you. He is the one that fills every empty gap that you can ever imagine. Why? Because he pre-qualified you for this race. He said, you know what? I love you just because. Just because. Get her done. I love it. 1 Corinthians chapter 9 says, know ye not that they which run in a race run all, but only one receives the prize. So run that you may obtain. The word run in the Greek word is tretio, and it means to run, and indicates a constant and continuous race. But then the very next verse, Paul says this in 25. He says, and every man that strives for the mastery is temperate in all things. Now they do it to obtain a corruptible crown, but we do it to obtain a incorruptible crown. Because what is he talking about here? He said, there are those who do it for a corruptible crown. All it is vainglory. They're just doing it for recognition. He said, but because Jesus has already pre-qualified you in this race, now we're going to get the winner's prize. We're going to get an incorruptible crown that nobody can take away. There's no rust on an incorruptible crown. He gives you something that is perfect. He gives you something that will last forever. And I love that because we look at all this stuff in the NIV in verse 25. It says, do you not know that in a race, all the runners win? Isn't that one of the most unusual races? Because you typically think in a race that only one person wins. But in this race, he says, you know what? Everybody wins. You're already pre-qualified long before you even enter the race. And he says, if you get in the race, you're going to win. But how many realize the challenge is not knowing what's going to happen in the end? The challenge for somebody, and for most, is the journey along the way. Because there's some people you might, if I were to tell you here today, you know, everybody gets a crown. Well, great. How do we get the crown? Well, you got to at least get in the race. And then in the race, then stuff happens. If you were out in the street, you might replace the word stuff with something else. But stuff happens. And in the midst of all your stuff, in the midst of all your disappointment, the thing that will never ever change is your pre-qualifying. Because he still loves you. Even when you fail, even when you fall, even when it's like, I just don't know. He says, you know what? All I want you to do is enjoy me along the way. People compete. Listen to this. People compete for two reasons. Number one, that they like the sport and they want the victory. And there's maybe one person here who loves competition more than me. I mean, I wake up, you know, my greatest competition is myself. You know why? Because I'm never satisfied with anything. I'm never satisfied with successes. I'm never satisfied with my journey. And that maybe that's a bad thing or a good thing. I'm never satisfied with victories. I'm never satisfied with wins because I know that I can do better. You know, I am on a continual process of trying to better me. Because I know that if I can better me, then I can better those that are around me as well. When I see my players and kids that I'm coaching, I don't look at them for what they are. I look at them for what they can be. How many know a good coach and a good pastor is not those who just look at somebody and go, okay. But we're always trying to make people better. How many realize that the very time in this process of trying to make people better, the very moment that they think they've arrived, they've already started to go backwards. See, this is a forward process. And I love this when it comes to our faith and our walk with the Lord, that we are constantly pressing forward. Here's another slide. You can't possess what you're not willing to pursue. Nibble on that for a little bit. You can't possess what you're not willing to pursue. You must pursue. You've got to press towards and mentally, I suppose it says mentality, and mentally possess your prize long before you ever have it. One of the keys in being successful in this race of life is persistence. That you can't throw in the towel, guys. You can't quit when somebody gets in your face and gets up in your grill and starts telling you where to go. I've told you this before. If people tell you where to go, you tell them they don't let Christians in there. You'll get it tomorrow. One of the keys to being successful in anything you do is persistence. It is the ability to maintain action, listen to this, regardless of your feelings. That you press on even when you feel like quitting. That when you work on any big goal, whatever your motivation is, sometimes it'll wax and sometimes it'll wane. And sometimes you feel like, waves hitting the shore. But sometimes you get to the place where you're like, I'm not quitting. I'm going to keep on pressing in. I'm going to keep on going. Why? Because persistence allows you to keep taking action even when you don't feel motivated to do so. And therefore, you keep accumulating results. Don't think that when these drivers are going 500 miles, that they don't feel like stopping. Don't feel like if you watch a NASCAR thing on Sunday afternoons, I'm sure you may not be coming. I guess you might, and Kevin does, and Pastor Carl and we're on. That there's all sorts of communication going on in the car, from the spotters to the control towers to the engineers and so on. And these drivers seem to be always complaining about something. And I'm sure that, they would have like, oh man, isn't it like us? How many have ever complained? I know you have. I'm not even going to ask you that. We all complain sometimes. But thank God for a spotter. Thank God for a control tower. Thank God for an engineer. He's like, hey, just get her done. You can come in for a rest, but just get her done. There's times it's like, holy cow, I don't understand life. And sometimes you never will. But the fact is, just stay in your car. Trust your leadership. Trust your pastor. They've all pre-qualified. Jesus is already pre-qualified. You're going to get through. Don't worry about your flat tires. Don't worry about that it's too hot in your car. Don't worry about that the air conditioning ain't working and maybe the battery's not working. You're going to get through this thing. It's not all that bad. Sometimes we make a mountain out of a molehill, man. I got people in my business, sometimes I just want to slap a big fat knot on their head. I'm like, seriously? You're whining about that? You're going to let somebody else steal your joy? You're going to let somebody else steal your life just because they don't agree with you? How many have ever had somebody not agree with you? And then what happens? You're like, they don't agree with me. Oh, and this whole anxiety comes over you. And you start worrying. Trust me, I've gone through that. And she's smiling because she knows. I'm like, what are they going to think? Why do I give a rip what they think? Why am I going to let their thought process put me in a prison for 38 years? They don't know what's going through me. They don't know what's going on in my head. I put myself on my own private prison sometimes because I'm so worried about what they think, and they can care less what they think. They're not in the prison. They're enjoying life while I'm like, put me in the prison. Why? Because sometimes I'm like, wow, I don't get through this whole thing that I've got to be persistent and I got to keep pressing through, even when objections are there. Even when sometimes the funds aren't in the bank account, I'm like, oh my gosh. It's not your motivation that will produce results, it's your action. Persistence allows you to keep taking action even when you don't feel motivated to do so. Watch what Benjamin says. this guy Benjamin Disraeli. He says, the secret to success is constancy to purpose. Why do you run? Why do you believe? Why bother? Let's bring it down to where we are. Why do you believe this whole Christianity thing? Why bother anyway? I mean, seriously? Some of us really need to answer this question. What is your why? Why do you believe this stuff anyway? People say, well, it's just a crutch for you. And it's far beyond a crutch, guys. Jesus is not a crutch for Bobby and Cheryl Sullivan. Jesus is my life support system. I can't function without Daddy. He's my breath. He's my heartbeat. He's my everything. Dale Carnegie says, most of the important things in the world have been accomplished by people who have kept on trying when there seemed to be no hope at all. Louis Pasteur says, let me tell you the secret that has led me to my goal, that my strength lies solely in my tenacity. How many know some of you here today, you need, and we need, I'll throw me in there to help you out. We need a backbone. You need to know why you believe what you believe. Some of you get on the street, or maybe you might go down to Mardi Gras like Cheryl and I have it at times, and some of these old backslidden, beer-sucking heathens, man, they are crazy. Some of them jokers know the Bible more than us. And we go back to the pastor, and he's like, oh, pastor, he spit on me. And you let that ruin your day? I don't really think, Bill, that we've gone through a whole lot of persecution here. Some people might yell at you, oh, that's too bad. My alarm clock didn't go off. Oh. And we just go through this whole crazy thing. I want to encourage you today, be persistent in what you believe. The person who is not persistent has never really been persuaded and will never be persuasive. The person who is not persistent has never really been persuaded at all and will never be persuasive. You've got to be constant in your faith in this journey, in this race. Somebody said one time, if I can talk you into something, somebody else can talk you out of it. You've got to have so much faith in your Father. Remember, I always say favor, how does that thing go? Favor follows the faithful forever. That you have to be so consistent and persistent in your walk that it doesn't matter what people say along the journey, you cannot be persuaded to change your mind. It is death do us part, till death do us part, or till Jesus takes us home. You see, Christianity for me, it's not a hobby. I'm not a weekend church warrior. What I live here and what I pronounce and what I preach behind this pulpit, hopefully is what people see even when I'm out on the field. I told a kid the other day, when we look at, and we've had some transition, y'all know we're all in some kind of a transition from glory to glory. And when we think about ministry, sometimes we're bound to this and we think that we can't do ministry outside of this. As awesome as this is. But some of the greatest ministry that we're finding is when I'm out on the football field. And there's this big, strong, strapping linebacker kid that played for Northern High School in Sarnia, and now he signed with Western Mustangs. And I told him something last year that I thought he might have forgotten, because sometimes linebackers aren't the sharpest tool in the box. And I told him this. I said, I won't give you his name, but I said, names will be forgotten, stats will be broken, but legacies live forever. Because sometimes we always strive to have that great statistic and, we want our name on the UWO, wall of champions. But I said the greatest thing that you can leave is not your stats and not your name, but a legacy. And I spoke to him a few weeks ago, and I said, hey, do you remember what I said? He said, yeah, names will be forgotten, stats will be broken, but legacies live forever. And I saw him last week on the field, and I went to go shake his hand, and he said, You're not shaking my hand, coach. And he gave me this great big, the kids like got legs, you know. And he gave me this great big hug in front of all his players. I thought, wow, that's kind of cool. And his dad came up and he said this. He said, you know what? He said, I'm not here to try to pump you up. You know, they call me chaplain. He said, I'm not here to pump you up, chap. He said, but whatever it is that you said to my kid has radically changed his life. And sometimes we think that just because it doesn't, our ministry isn't in the cookie cutter the way we think it is, that God can't use us outside of the cookie cutter. God says, I've already pre-qualified you for ministry. Ministry is your number one priority. He said, love me with all your heart, all your soul, all your mind. Be persistent in everything that you do. And how many realize if you're persistent in everything you do, if my kids will be persistent in everything that they do, they get the attention of the father, they get the attention of the mother. My ball players, they get the attention of me. If I know that they're constantly trying to better themselves, that they'll always get the attention of me. Be persistent in what you believe. Doubt is deadly. Let's get through this thing. Somebody said, get going, because Kevin only gave me 15 minutes and I used it up a long time ago. Faith without works is dead. Proverbs 27:23 says, be thou diligent to know the state of thy flocks and look well to thy herds, that you will never succeed in anything unless you really believe that you can. And you've got to believe that you will win long before you ever enter the race. So I get excited when we see stuff. I'm going to zip through some stuff. You don't mind, right? Here we go. 4 things. Can we get 4 things? Let's see if we can do this, because I'm looking at this retarded clock here. 4 things to run a good race. Lay aside every hindrance. Verse 1 says, let us lay aside every weight and the sin which easily entangles us or ensnares us. The word weight is onkos and means anything that diverts our attention. Sin can be anything, good or bad, that prevents really the flow of God in our lives. Anything that holds us back, anything that weighs us down. Wilbur Chapman said this. He said, the rule of my life is this: anything that dims my vision of Christ or takes away my taste for Bible study or cramps my prayer life or makes Christian words difficult, it is wrong for me. This is what he is saying. It is wrong for me. And as a Christian, I've got to turn away from it. So he says that I've got to lay aside every sin and the sin that so easily entangles us. And sometimes, you get through this thing and you feel like, wow. Scripture says, let us not be weary in well-doing, for we shall reap if we faint not. In other words, sometimes you get tired. How many of you would be honest and say, in your walk with God, you've gotten a little tired along the way? That fatigue maybe has crept in just a little bit. That sometimes you don't feel like going out on Wednesday. Oops. Or you may not feel like getting involved in those Wednesday night classes just because stuff happens and work happens, and I get it. And there are people who just don't quite feel like getting up on Sunday morning. I didn't feel like getting up on Sunday morning when we were pastoring out in Mount Bridges. I told Sheila, I don't feel like getting up. She says, you have to. You're the pastor. You have to go to church. And I said, put a video on or something. Fatigue, we get all tired. Don't get tired in well-doing, for you'll reap if you faint not. Sometimes in your pursuit of persistence, you need to step back. Listen to this. This is good for you. You need to step back and rest for a minute. You need to recoup. You need to refresh, and you need to revitalize. And you've got to understand this, that rest and relaxation are not a sin. Pastor Carl and Pastor Thomas, they've got to get away to Barbados. Now, some of you might have said, well, you can go away to North Pole. How many of you would go to Barbados with them? Now, they wouldn't want you because they have to put up with you every week, but they need to get away. Because how many know if they don't come apart, they'll come apart. They've got to get away. And they've got to enjoy each other's company. Some of you, listen to this as we wrap this up. Some of you here today, and this, are you getting anything out of this? I mean, come on, work with me. Throw me a bone. Okay. In this journey that you're going through, don't beat yourself up if you're not measuring up to whoever's standards. That sometimes you just have to step back. I remember one time Cheryl and I went on a cruise, and this will sound weird. This will sound really weird. Matter of fact, it probably sounds so weird, I'll hear about it later on. We went on a 7-day cruise, and I said this, and this is going all over the planet, so I'm like, oh, I don't know if I want to go on this road, but anyway, we're here. I said this, I get on the cruise, I said, God, I'll talk to you in 7 days. He said, have a good week. How many know you have an incredible amount of trust with your daddy when he says, you know what, Bobby, I'll be here after the 7 days. I know you're not leaving. You just go and enjoy your rest. And in the midst of your recuperation, in the midst of your lying down, I know I'll be in your thoughts. I know that you'll be there for me. And he says, I have this incredible love relationship with you that you just go and enjoy your vacation. Some of you just need to take a little vacation. Maybe it's a mental vacation. Maybe it's just a little break. I'm not saying don't leave. I'm not saying leave the church. Oh, my God, I'm not saying that. I'm on a vacation for 5 years. This would be the last time Pastor lets me preach here. So you've got to run with endurance. That's the second thing. I think are we on the second one? I got to zip through this crazy. Run with endurance. Endurance is the steady determination to keep going. It means continuing when everything in you wants to slow down or give up. So there's this endurance within you. You got to, do we have another slide there? I think we might. What's the next one? Is that next one number 3? Okay. So you got to be persistent in your plan. Okay? So what is a plan? A plan is a written list of arranged actions necessary to achieve your desired goal. Sometimes you have to do something you hate to create something you love. Sometimes you have to do something, maybe hate's a strong word. Sometimes you have to do something that you're not comfortable with, maybe, to create something that you love. How many know consistency, persistency, it's always a challenge, and it challenges your flesh. And you want to sometimes, throw in the towel, but you've got to have a good plan. You've got to have a good desire, and you're going to get through this thing. It's really awesome. So we're going to get through this somehow. Number 3, we must shift our focus. Verse 2, it says, looking to Jesus. The Greek word that has the idea of a concentrating your gaze. It means to look away from other things so that you can focus all your attention on one object. That we shift our focus. And I love that thing because we shift our focus on the Lord. I love what Carly was saying in the prayer time. In 5 minutes, I'll be done. In the prayer time, she was saying, that there was just a moment, I think it was, where she broke down. How many of the goodness of the Lord can break you down so easy? And it's not a bad breakdown. But how many have ever, where's Jeff? How many have ever just thought sometimes, and you just think all of a sudden on the goodness of the Lord, and then you lose it. You're crying, you're weeping, and you're just a spiritual, emotional basket case sometimes. But I was thinking about that last night. I was laying on the couch in our prayer time, and I just thought about just the goodness of the Lord. And I just lost it. I was like, I don't get it. I would much rather be soft and pliable and broken than hard and cold-hearted any day. Because I'm persistent in this journey. I'm constant in my goals. There's no shame in my game. There's no quitting. There's no throwing in the towel. There's an endurance that's on the inside of me. And verse 3 says, for consider him who endured such hostility from sinners against himself, lest you become weary and discouraged in your own souls. Don't throw in the towel. Don't give up. Let me end with this. Dale Earnhardt Sr. said, the winner, this is good Southern talk. What do you think, Jeff? Okay, that's good. Jeff's still saying hi. Everybody say hi. You can tell you're... No, okay. Wait, I didn't get this thing. Go back to him. The late, great Dale Earnhardt Sr. said, the winner ain't the one with the fastest car, it's the one who refuses to lose. Get her done. And then my buddy over here, Jeff Gordon, says, I don't feel I'm a step above anyone on this team. I'm just another link in the chain. Do we have another one? I think maybe. So the question is, how bad do you want to win this race? Bad enough to win it. So I've just got 3 things to say to you, really. I don't know if we have her here. My buddy.
This is Larry the Cable Guy. There's a lot of ways to say get her done. This is one. Get her done. Here's another one.
Get her done.
And here's another different way.
Get her done.
All 3 different meanings to the word get her done.
So I just want to encourage everybody here today, just get her done. Anytime you can do it, get her done, get her done, get her done, and have fun along the way. All right, y'all get something out of that? Just a little bit. Sorry I had to rush through it, but, you know, there's notes that'll be available on the website. So let's all stand. Father, I thank you, Lord Jesus, for today. God, I'm so honored to be the guest, if you will, behind this incredible pulpit. This is home. It's not a timeshare. It's a home for me. Father, you are the ultimate. I keep thinking wrestling sometimes. You're the ultimate warrior. You're the ultimate champion. You are the driver of all time. God, there is no second for you. We are all first place. We are all winners in this race, and you pre-qualified us to be in this race. And we all win at the end. But sometimes we feel like we can't make it to the end. Sometimes we feel like we have a blown tire and a blown engine, and sometimes there is some shame in our game and some quit in our step. There is some times that we just don't understand the way things happen. But we don't quit. We don't give up. I pray, Father, today that you would speak to those in our house who are a little discouraged today. And this may have been one of the goofiest messages that they've ever seen, and maybe next week we'll get back to something, real. But God, I know that there's something in here that spoke to somebody today. And I pray, Father, today that you wrap your arms around these individuals, all of us. And God, that you whisper inside every one of our ears here today how massively important we are to you and how much you really love us. I'm going to ask the ministry team to come forward, if you will. And those on the worship team, you may be here today. Well, here's a good question. If you just heard what I said, you are here today. That's kind of dumb, isn't it? What do you think, Joe? Okay. I want you to take your neighbor by the hand, if you will, and I'm going to ask that you just not leave for a second. Sue, you did a great job trying to catch up with me and all this stuff. It's crazy. I want you to take your neighbor by the hand, if you will, and I'm going to have you ask your neighbor a very important question. It's a question that we have literally asked thousands of people over the 30 years of ministry, but I know it's going to be one that's going to be direct and pivoted and pointed and somewhat direct, but it's going to be the best question that somebody has ever asked you in your life. The question is not going to be, how bad do you want to win? Because there are no losers in this house. Somebody said one time, winners never quit and quitters never win. You might feel like you're a 0 in this house. But if you attach yourself to Jesus, who is number 1, that makes you a perfect 10. And you may be here saying, you know what? I don't feel like a perfect 10. Sometimes I feel like a 3 or a 4 or a 0. Sometimes I don't even feel like getting in the stinking car, man. I don't even feel like putting on this jersey. I don't even feel like going to church. Jesus, I don't even know if you're real, but you've got to be more real than a curse word. How come people don't say, oh, I can't say that. How come people don't say, oh, Buddha blanket? You know what I mean? Oh, Confucius. Because the devil is going to do everything he can to distort and delete the name Jesus and break down that name Jesus to a curse word. There is no other name on earth whereby men and women will be saved except the name of Jesus. God's last name isn't damn it, that's for sure. If you're here today and say, I don't know him like you've been talking about, but I really want to. On the count of 3, I'm going to ask your neighbor to ask you this question. Are you absolutely sure your life is right with God? And if that person says, in all of their honesty, no, my life isn't, but I want it to be, then I'm going to ask the one who asked the question and the one on the receiving end, I want you just to step forward. You say, why do I have to make such a big deal about stepping forward? Because this is the very first public step for you. And this is a safe house. This isn't a jailhouse. This is a safe house. And then I'm going to have you come to Bill and Jeff and Sandra and the rest of the ministry team, and let us love on you. Let us pray with you, and let us walk you into this journey of faith for you. On the count of 3, I want you to ask your neighbor that question. If nobody asks you, then just ask yourself, and you can respond accordingly, okay? On the count of 3, are you absolutely sure your life is right with God? You ready? 1, 2, 3, ask. Thank you, Lord. Thank you, Lord. If you're here today and you need prayer for anything whatsoever, I'm going to invite you to come forward to the ministry team, and they'll pray with you, walk you through some things. Doesn't matter what it is. Maybe you need some new oil in your engine. Hello. Maybe you need some gas in your engine. Maybe you need a new paint job. Whatever. Father, we bless you today. We love you. We honor you. For those who have to go, we dismiss them with your glory, with your presence, with your protection. In Jesus' name.